What's up, guys? Sithoni Lance here, bringing you the brand new deck profile. This is my Goat Control deck profile, and it's a really fun deck, and it's a really fun format to play in. Let me give you a brief history of the the Goat Control format. Goat Control started around in 2005. I believe it was early 2005 or mid 2005 um, when this deck started coming around, and it was a deck that based around getting Thousand Eyes Restrict out with Metamorphosis using Scapegoats. Now there are other different variations of the deck where you're running level 4s and level 5s where you just get those out too. And it was considered one of the best decks of the format next to a burn deck that was out at the time. For some this deck got a lot of things that you see on the ban list either limited or banned altogether. I believe Delinquent Duo got banned that same format, and then Metamorphosis got limited to 1, and I think Premature Burial also got banned that format, and Thousand Eyes Restrict got limited. So rendering the deck mostly unplayable. Also got Scapegoat, made Scapegoat go to 1, made this card go to 1 too. So it was a harsh time for that deck. The strange thing about this deck is that not very much stuff is left banned. If they unbanned a couple of things, I think the deck could come back in full force. I don't think it'll ever be as playable as it used to be, but the majority of the stuff that you see in this deck is quite legal, actually. So anyway, without further ado, let us begin with a deck profile. One BLS. BLS is usually your big monster. It helps secure victories. It's usually there to secure victories. Occasionally, what your opponent will do is, if they're staring down a BLS, they'll either Premature Burial their own if they haven't used it, find a way to destroy it with countless answers such as Tribe-Infecting, Ring of Destruction, Torrential, or something of that nature. DD War Lady was always a good out to it, so was DD Assailant. Since it only targeted face-up card monsters at the time, and it still does. But this card, usually, once you got this card out, you typically won. Some people would Snatch Steal it, and that's why, and people would hold MST or Destiny for that reason. Jinzo, this card was used mostly to counter the burn matchup. Burn back then played a significant role in the format against this deck. Since it was such a trap-heavy deck, it made sense to run a Jinzo, and Jinzo was also limited to 1 at the time. Airknight Parshath, which is a card mainly strictly for the goats themselves. It stops goats from happening, and it does a little bit of damage while you're kind of in that dead spot of the goats, and you also get the draw cards every time it inflicts battle damage. So Kycoo, this card was always good because if it dealt battle damage to your opponent's life points or at all, you could just banish 2 monster cards in their graveyard. I believe back then, before they added this card, it used to say 2 cards, making it really devastating. I think it was still like that at the time. I'm not entirely sure. DD Assailant, mostly to counter the mirror with BLS and get rid of Airknight Parshath and Jinzos and whatnot. Asura Priest was another way to get rid of all the goats on the field because it attacked everything on the field. Enraged Battle Ox, another method of doing damage while you have goats on the field. Some people typically run this card, Xarian Universe, but whatever, it lost 400 attack if it were to deal with piercing damage, but it would lose 400 attack, but then it dealt piercing damage, and it lasted until the end of the turn. I think this card is better because it'll do more damage in the long run than this card. 14 is much lower than 17, so. One, Tribe-Infecting Virus. This was one of your main methods of blowing up your opponent's field and getting rid of pesky things in the way. It was also a counter to the burn matchup because a lot of the decks back in the day were running this card, Solar Flare Dragon. Solar Flare Dragon was a big thing back then. Now it's not so much, but the lock is still pretty hefty. Solar Flare Dragon was one of the key things that made the burn deck really viable back then. One breaker, you would usually, this card was really good because at first it was a 1900 beat stick. And then if your opponent has something in the back row that you didn't necessarily want to handle, like a Mirror Force or a Bring of Destruction or a Torrential Tribute, you would just pop that as soon as possible. So it worked out in the end. Next, you got the 1DD Warrior Lady. This card was limited at the time, and it was a counter to Jinzo and BLS. So Zaloog, if this card were to ever deal battle damage, you discard one random card from your opponent's hand, or send the top two cards from your opponent's deck to the graveyard. This card was devastating either way. You looked at it because sending the top two cards of your opponent's deck was still a huge thing, and discarding your opponent's one card in your opponent's hand is still pretty big. One Tsukuyomi. Occasionally, you'll see builds run two of these. Tsukuyomi was usually there to get to flip things face down and get things back, such as flipping this card so you can use BLS again, flipping back Morphing Jar or Magician's Faith so you can use them again. They're mainly there to recycle your card effects. So, Sangan, this card is usually was made at the time to use to search for cards like Tsukuyomi, Morphing Jar, Magician's Faith, DD Warrior Lady, Zaloog. You would never go to Sinister Serpent for this card, but we'll talk about that. Morphing Jar, basically one of the big cards of the deck, because there's a lot of times where the deck happens to have a giant dry spell, where it won't draw the answers on the monsters that it needs to function properly. So drawing a brand new hand helps. 2, Magician of Faith, or as people used to call this, Moth. It added one spell card from your deck, from your graveyard to your hand, which was really a big thing because there was a lot of things that you wanted to keep, back in your hand. You wanted your Lightning Vortexes back. You wanted your Graceful Charities to draw again. You wanted Metamorphosis back. You definitely wanted your MSTs if you used them way too early. But on the general side, you use this card for all your spells. Next, you have Sinister Serpent. Basically, your discard fodder for Tribe-Infecting Virus. It was also a 1-for-1 for Delinquent Duo, and it also it was a 1-for-1 for Graceful Charity because it wouldn't let you discard that card. Some people I think for this card. Where is that? Force Sentry is a spell card. This card, I believe, was banned at the time, and confiscation wasn't a thing, but still discarding was still a huge thing. Next, we're going to move on to the spells. 1 Heavy Storm. You could run Heavy Storm all day long in this format. Heavy Storm wasn't considered broken at the time. Heavy Storm, we usually to get rid of that burn deck. It also helped against the mirror match because they did run a fair amount of spells. Creature Swap. Occasionally, your deck again would run into a bit of a dry spell, and stealing your opponent's monster was really good, especially if it's a BLS or a Jinzo or a Airknight Parshath. So, Delinquent Duo. This card was fantastic in the deck. Having the ability to discard basically 2 cards from your opponent's hand was really significant in the game. If your opponent discarded Sinister Serpent, they would just get it back to the next turn. But the card right now is it's kind of too good still. I would consider it too good, but I would see it come back to 1 because discarding isn't as good as it used to be. But still, back then it was a huge deal, especially discarding 2 cards. So, Metamorphosis, one of the key cards in the deck to use to make this card, and you can use it to make all these down here. So that's what it was there for. 1 Pot of Greed, drawing 2 is always a good thing. Lightning Vortex, your replacement for Dark Hole and the Raigeki, because those were both banned at the time. Raigeki is a great answer to Jinzos and BLSs and all that stuff you don't want on the field. So, 2 Nobleman of Crossout. This card was usually mainly to get rid of those pesky effects like Magician's Faith and stuff. It's just a good tech. It's not hardly useful sometimes, but sometimes it just gets rid of 1 card, which is not bad. If you use this against your own, use this against Magician of Faith, you're likely going to get rid of your own. So, Graceful Charity, drawing 3 cards is enough to warrant MST. At the time, it was at 1, so and people would hold this card to the very last minute until they needed it, until people would, your opponent dropped a Snatch Steal or a Premature Burial, then you just kill it. You would hardly ever set this card, because people would just blind MST sometimes, and it happens. Book of Moon. I don't believe Book of Moon was at 1 at this time. I believe it was at 3. But Book of Moon, regardless, is a fantastic card. It was one of the key plays to recycle your effects again. And another key card of the deck is 3 Scapegoat. Scapegoat was one of the main cards of the deck, and it helped it function. Especially some of those 4 sheep tokens and being able to Metamorphosis for a 1,000 eyes restrict is pretty good. 1 Snatch Steal, because Snatch Steal at the time, again, stealing monsters was great. Even BLS was good. Even stealing their Dawn's Zaloogs would have been nice. But their gain 1,000 life points didn't make much of a difference, considering how by that turn, if you stole something of theirs, you would win the next turn. So 1 Premature Burial, for some reason in this thing it doesn't have the equip spell, but equip spell symbol, but whatever. Premature Burial is one of those cards that's basically your replacement for Monster Reborn, because it was also banned at the time. 1 Ceasefire to burn your opponent for a little bit. I know it's kind of weird, because you don't really want to burn your opponent, but it's there in case you're playing a burn deck. So it's not really good against the mirror match, honestly. 1 Mirror Force. Mirror Force was at 1 at the time, and it was one of your main methods to get rid of everything. Same thing with Torrential Tribute. Dust Tornado, same kind of preference as MST, but I think Dust Tornado was at 2. So yeah. Ring Your Destruction. You would usually wait until it was a tie game, or it was a card, or you were close to winning that turn. It would just end games very quickly. And Call the Haunted. Call the Haunted was a main card in the deck, because it would bring back Jinzos, it would bring back BLSs, and it would bring back Airknight Parshaths. If you remember, like Jinzo, it wouldn't affect it that much, because if they destroyed it, because it would just stay there, because it negates all traps. So yeah. Next, we're moving on to the extra deck. Next, we're going to start with a big guy himself, 1,000 Eyes Restrict. You're going to be wanting to run 3 of these cards. 3 copies. The ability that other monsters can't attack isn't really a disadvantage, because you'll just equip one of your opponent's monsters to get over things. Generally, this card is really devastating in the late game if your opponent already has a BLS, and you go Metamorphosis and Scapegoat, take a BLS, and just keep hitting him in the face. Plus, it also has the added bonus that it can't die. It can't die the first time. Fusionist. Fusionist is one of those cards you make with Metamorphosis with Sangan. Same thing with Dragoness. You'll make Dragoness first before you make Fusionist. 3 Balter. Balter the Terrible. This card was your main way of getting rid of your opponent's normal spell cards and effect monsters. Ojama King, because it stopped your opponent from summoning and going off a lot. Ryu Senshi. Basically, you're out to normal traps. 1 Sandwich, because it's a good thing. And 3 Darkblade. It's basically Kycoo, but bigger, and it does more. Occasionally, in some decks, you'll see people run Last Warrior, the Last Warrior from Another Planet, or Bakuri Bucks, because level 7s were still a thing. I don't think you would ever really go into a level 8, because I don't think they were that big at the time, honestly. So, yeah. Anyway, that's what I got for y'all today. Go Control is is considered one of the most skillful formats in all the game. Tell me what you guys think about this deck. If you think it's too broken and it should never come back, or if it's really too slow and it wouldn't make a difference in the format. Anyway,